The world had become a graveyard, a hollow shell of what it once was. I wandered through the desolation, my steps echoing off the broken buildings and rusted cars that littered the streets. The sky was a perpetual shade of gray, choked by clouds of ash that obscured the sun. I was alone, or so I thought. In this post-apocalyptic wasteland, every sound was amplified, and every shadow seemed to whisper secrets of the past. My senses were on edge, attuned to the slightest hint of danger. But nothing could prepare me for what I would encounter. It was in the ruins of an old apartment building that I first heard it, a soft, melodic humming that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. I froze in place, my heart pounding in my chest as I strained to locate the source of the sound. It seemed to draw me in, like a siren's song luring sailors to their doom. Against my better judgment, I followed the haunting melody, descending deeper into the bowels of the building. The air grew thick with dust and decay, and the dim light from my flashlight cast long shadows that danced along the walls. As I rounded a corner, I saw her, a figure cloaked in tattered rags, her back turned to me as she swayed gently to the rhythm of her song. My blood ran cold as I realized that she was not alone. Surrounding her were the remains of the building's former inhabitants, their vacant eyes staring into nothingness as they joined in the eerie chorus. I should have turned and fled, but something held me in place, rooted to the spot, as if by unseen hands. The woman turned towards me, her face hidden beneath a veil of darkness. And yet, I could feel her gaze piercing through me, probing the depths of my soul. Without warning, the singing stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence that seemed to suffocate the very air around us. And then, she spoke. A voice like silk and steel, ancient and terrible. "Welcome, traveler," she said, her words echoing in the emptiness. "You have wandered far from home, but here you will find no sanctuary, only despair." I tried to speak, to ask her who she was and what she wanted, but my voice caught in my throat like a fly trapped in a spider's web. She moved closer, her form shifting and twisting like smoke in the wind. "You seek answers," she continued, her voice dripping with malice. "But the truth is more than you can bear. You're but a pawn in a game that has already been lost." I stumbled backward, my mind reeling with fear and confusion. The world seemed to warp and twist around me, as if reality itself was unraveling at the seams. And then, with a suddenness that left me breathless, the woman was upon me. Her touch was like ice against my skin, sending shivers down my spine as she whispered words of madness and despair into my ear. I closed my eyes, praying for release from this waking nightmare. But when I opened them again, she was gone, leaving me alone in the darkness. I fled then, my feet pounding against the cold pavement as I raced through the streets, desperate to escape the horrors that lurked in the shadows. But no matter how far I ran, I could still hear her voice echoing in my mind, a constant reminder of the darkness that had consumed the world. In the end, I realized that there was no escape, no hope of redemption in this forsaken land. For the true horror was not the creatures that stalked the night, but the darkness that dwelled within us all.
The world ended in silence, not with a bang, nor with a whimper, but with an eerie stillness that settled over the land like a shroud. I remember the day it happened, the day the skies turned black and the earth fell silent. It was a day like any other until it wasn't. I was huddled in my makeshift shelter, a crumbling apartment building that had somehow survived the chaos that had engulfed the world. Outside, the air was thick with the stench of death and decay, and the streets lay empty and silent, devoid of life. I had long since lost track of time, days blending into nights as I waited for salvation that never came. Food was scarce, water even scarcer, and each day brought with it the gnawing fear that I would be the last person left alive in this desolate world. But then, one day, something changed. I woke to the sound of static crackling through the air, a faint whisper of life in the dead silence that surrounded me. At first, I thought it was my imagination, a trick of my weary mind playing cruel tricks on me. But as I listened closer, I realized that it was coming from the old radio tucked away in the corner of the room. Heart pounding in my chest, I scrambled towards the radio, fingers trembling as I adjusted the dials in search of the source of the signal. And then, there it was. A voice, faint and distorted, but unmistakably human. If anyone out there is listening, please, you have to help us. They're coming for us, and there's nowhere left to run. The voice was panicked, desperate, and I strained to catch every word, my mind racing with questions. Who were they? What were they running from? And most importantly, where were they? For hours, I listened to the broadcast, the voice growing weaker with each passing minute, as if the speaker was fading away into the darkness. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the transmission cut off, leaving me alone once more in the silence. But the message had been clear. Somewhere out there in the vast expanse of the wasteland, there were others like me, fighting to survive against whatever horrors lurked in the shadows. And if there was even the slightest chance that I could help them, I had to try. Gathering what supplies I could carry, I set out into the unknown, guided only by the faint hope that I might find the source of the broadcast and the answers that lay beyond. The journey was long and treacherous, the landscape unforgiving and cruel. But with each step, I felt a renewed sense of purpose and a determination to find the truth no matter the cost. Days turned into weeks, and still I pressed on, driven by a sense of duty that bordered on obsession. And then one day I found it, a small, forgotten outpost hidden deep within the heart of the wasteland. The buildings were crumbling, barely standing against the ravages of time and neglect. But there was life here, faint though it may be, a flickering beacon of hope in a world consumed by darkness. I approached cautiously, my senses on high alert as I searched for any sign of the people who had sent out the distress call. And then I saw them, huddled together in the shadows, their faces twisted in terror as they whispered feverishly among themselves. I called out to them, my voice echoing through the empty streets, but they only recoiled further, their eyes wide with fear. And then one of them spoke, a voice like gravel and glass, filled with a coldness that chilled me to the bone. "We warned you not to come," they said, their words dripping with venom. "We warned you that they would come for you too." I tried to ask them who they were and what they meant by their cryptic warning. But they only shook their heads, their eyes darting nervously toward the shadows. And then I heard it, the sound of footsteps echoing through the darkness, growing louder with each passing moment. They were coming, whatever they were, and there was nowhere left to run. In that moment, I realized the true horror of the world we now inhabited, a world where even the faintest glimmer of hope could lead us straight into the jaws of madness. And as the shadows closed in around us, I knew that I was not alone, that somewhere out there, in the vast expanse of the wasteland, others were listening, waiting for their own salvation that would never come.